Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Finance Committee on December the 11th, 2025. And before we get into the public hearing tonight, we have some business we have to cover along with the Finance Committee and the manager. So before we get started, I'd like to have the members introduce themselves. I'll start this time on my left, Vice Chair.
Jim Flynn.
Vikram Chabra.
Dave Remington.
Victoria Pitney.
Milind Kanitkar.
Dennis O'Connell.
Kelly Barner.
Thank you. So the first order of business is we've got to review and accept the minutes of October the 9th and October the 22nd. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes? Any corrections?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll move on to the town manager's report, and maybe the town manager first like to introduce
Sure,
Alex and
sure.
Keith.
Good evening, everyone. Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager.
Alexandra Martinez, Director of Budget and Financial Planning.
Keith Baldinger, Assistant Town Manager for Operations.
And I forgot to introduce myself, Gene Budnick, I'm the chairman.
Goes without introduction.
Okay, I guess, Kevin, we're ready.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here at the Finance Committee tonight. We will be starting off with a review of the FY27 Revenue Manual, which is the starting point for our annual budget process. I will turn it over to Ms. Martinez, and she'll walk you through the Revenue Manual, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, this is, the projections that we've done and the best estimates that we have at this time, and department budgets are due on Monday, so we don't have any of that information for you tonight, but we'll discuss the revenues and be back in a couple months to put it all together.
Thank you. So the FY27 Revenue Manual is the initial step in the development of the upcoming fiscal year budget, and it represents our initial best estimate of the revenues the town will generate for fiscal year 27, which covers July 1, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. For FY27, total projected revenue is $195,656,057, which is an increase of $3,853,593, or 2.01% over the FY26 budget. Revenue relies primarily on the tax levy, about 60%, which assumes a 2.5% increase plus new growth and state aid. Which is conservatively projected with a 1% increase pending the governor's official state budget release in late January 2026. The most variable category is local receipts and is budgeted at a 13.5% increase based on historical trends showing actual collections that consistently exceed budgeted figures by an average of about $3.8 million, or 30% annually. The Revenue Manual proposes the use of $3.7 million in free cash, primarily for capital improvements and emergency medical services startup funds. At this time, there is no proposed use of either general or override stabilization funds in the budget. The next public financial milestone will be the release of the town manager's recommended budget, Fiscal Projection 1, which will highlight revenues and departmental expenditures, and will be published by February 17th. So just diving into each individual category. Tax levy. Property tax is the primary source of revenue for virtually every Massachusetts municipality. In Shrewsbury, property taxes represent approximately 60% of annual revenues, and the FY27 tax levy assumes 2.5% increase over FY26 in accordance with Proposition 2.5 plus $1,350,000 in new growth. An additional $8,012,497 is added to the tax levy to cover the costs of debt service for projects approved by the voters as Proposition 2.5 debt exclusions. In FY26, the last payment for the fire facilities project will be made. State aid is the second largest revenue source, making up approximately 14.6% of revenue. State aid is the restricted and unrestricted aid provided to municipalities through the state budget. The governor typically releases the initial state budget projection in late January of each year, and prior to that release, we've applied a conservative 1% increase. anticipating that we'll most likely make some adjustments to this after the state budget, as some of these lines have trended well above the 1% mark, specifically Chapter 70, which is school aid. General government aid is local aid for our municipality and consists of reimbursements for benefits paid to veterans. Chapter 90 are funds allocated for roadway and capital improvements based on a formula that takes into account local road mileage, population, and employment. And this also includes the town allocation from the Fair Share Amendment, which is also known as the Millionaire's Tax, which reflects about $500,000. School aid, or Chapter 70, is the largest revenue source of state aid and are funds for public schools based on the number of pupils enrolled, and also include charter school tuition reimbursements. Tax exemption funds are property tax exemptions that we receive a partial reimbursement for individuals who meet certain eligibility criteria. And these exemption categories include veterans, blind persons, surviving spouses, and elderly. And the last category of state aid is cherry sheet offsets. These are typically grant funds reserved for direct expenditures related to school choice tuition and the library. The town of Shrewsbury operates 4 utility funds: water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. Utility revenue consists of the funds generated through rates and fees of these services. Water and sewer rates are reviewed regularly by the water commissioners, which are the select board, and the sewer commissioners to ensure that the fees generated accurately support the cost to supply the service to the community. The stormwater enterprise is operated under the MS4 permit, and the cost to comply with this permit is approximately $2 million a year, and this includes mitigation efforts such as catch basin cleaning and street sweeping. The solid waste enterprise fund raises funds through bag fees and bulk waste sticker fees to offset the cost of the enterprise fund by approximately 50%, with the remaining 50% being covered by the tax levy. A bag fee increase took effect on July 1st, 2025, but given some challenges in the market and revenue, lower than anticipated revenue projections, the 5-year fee model will require further detailed review to ensure its consistent stability given those recent challenges and some declining bag sales. On May 16th, 2018, the Public Education Governmental Access Programming and Services Agreement was signed between the town of Shrewsbury and the nonprofit Shrewsbury Media Connection for the purpose of the provision of PEG access programming and services, facilities, training, and equipment. The revenue for this fund is comprised of the franchise fees collected for use of the town's PEG access enterprise. Per the May 2024 agreement, the town estimates to receive 4.5% of gross annual revenue from cable operations from Selco to provide for the PEG programming. And the FY27 revenue estimate assumes about a 5% decline, giving trends of users cutting the cord and moving towards other streaming services. Local receipts are locally generated revenues other than real and personal property taxes. This is the most elastic revenue stream and the most dependent on economic conditions. And within local receipts, the largest category is motor vehicle excise, which is a locally imposed tax assessed to owners of motor vehicles registered to an address within the town of Shrewsbury. Other excise tax is comprised of meals, hotel, and cannabis excise tax. We've proposed a slight reduction in this line due to the closures of all hotels in town, and at the time, only short-term rentals are collecting this fee. Landfill revenue is an annual fee collected in monthly installments based on materials deposited into the landfill by Wheelabrator. The volume of ash disposal has remained steady year over year, and in FY27, the landfill began collecting ash from Saugus. It's estimated that by fiscal year 28, 100% of the ash from Saugus will be delivered to the landfill. Departmental fees are fees collected by various departments. Licenses and permits are fees collected for activities that are regulated through the town's bylaws, such as building permits, alcohol licenses, and marriage certificates. Interest income is income generated from investment income. This has been an extremely strong source of revenue over the past few years, and we've worked very closely with Bartholomew, our investment firm, to identify investment income forecasts. Rental income generates, we generate very minimal fees from rentals. This is mostly from a mobile home assessment and not significant enough to forecast and budget. Remaining revenue are various revenue sources such as the pilot payment from the Shrewsbury Housing Authority, street betterments, supplemental taxes on new construction, E-rate discounts for schools and libraries, and Selco's reimbursement to the town for gas and oil. As I mentioned, local receipts is the most elastic, and on average, we've budgeted this category at an increase of about 3% annually. However, over the past 5 years, the average difference between budgeted and actual local receipts has been 31.2%, meaning on average we've generated $3.8 million more in local receipts than budgeted. Taking that into consideration and doing some more detailed analysis, we're proposing to increase local receipts by about 13.5% over fiscal year 26 budgeted, and we feel very confident in this increase given the performance of these line items over recent years. And then this slide is again just showing the difference in budgeted to actual with local receipts. Free cash represents the portion of general fund surplus revenue that is unrestricted and available for appropriation. These funds, once certified, may be used to support supplemental appropriations during the year, to support the ensuing fiscal year's budget, to reduce the tax levy, or to serve as emergency reserves. Free cash as of July 1st, 2025 was certified at $13,347,063. The revenue manual proposes the use of $3.7 million in free cash. This includes $2 million to fund the capital improvement plan, $1 million in funding to start up the emergency medical services program, and about $700,000 in other various warrant articles, including the funding for Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, contribution to general stabilization, and the insurance trust fund. The town's stabilization funds consist of the general stabilization and the override stabilization fund. The general stabilization fund is the town's main reserve fund, designated to provide financial stability for all aspects of town operations while improving the town's creditworthiness and flexibility. The current balance of the general stabilization fund is $8,603,485. With the passage of the 2021 operational override, the town established a special purpose override stabilization fund. The creation of this fund provided the financial mechanism to manage the approach of the select board and the school committee to the town in prolonging the duration of the override. The current balance of the override stabilization fund is $9,470,466. As I mentioned, there is no proposed use of either general or override stabilization dollars in the FY27 budget, but we do propose to deposit $300,000 into the general stabilization account to maintain policy level. Revenues within the reduced levy category include the use of free cash and revenue received from Selco to further reduce the tax rate, and the reduced levy funds will be held level with FY26. Revenues within the other available funds category include those related to the sale of cemetery lots, debt service revenue from Selco, and internal account transfers. At this time, this does not include anticipated CPC revenue and projects or any other account transfers identified at this time, so we'll keep a look on this as we progress through the budget process. So again, in conclusion, as presented, the FY27 budget proposes an increase of $3.8 million, or 2.01%, over the FY26 budget. The development of the budget is in the initial stages, with town departments currently working on FY27 budget submissions, and we'll be back to the Finance Committee in January to review those initial projections, and fiscal projection 1 will be published in February. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. As I open up discussions here, maybe, I don't know if everybody has copies that can refer to the pages we're talking about, and then I'll open it up for questions Yes. David?
So, again, this year's great, we're not gonna put into, we don't need to use the override fund like we projected, which is good. And hopefully that pushes off the override another year. And I know these are just our, not net, this is our gross income coming in, so there's gonna be money coming off of this. Does this, now that we see that, we have another jump in income that we didn't expect, is there any thoughts of putting money into infrastructure? Like we had talked about previously, I mean, there's things that DPW need to be done, things in this building need to be done. There's other infrastructure things to be done. Since we, a couple of years ago, had a lot of extra money, we're having more money this year. Any thoughts of doing that?
Capital and one-time investments, is something that we are still discussing. Whether or not we will set more money aside is a question at this point. What I would say right now is when we take a high-level look at what this revenue will provide us, it's providing, base, like just bottom line without developing the budget yet, like base adjustments consistent with the change from FY '25 to FY '26. So about 4.25% with the schools, 4% on the municipal side, and then about 7% on the operating expenses like health insurance. So despite adding the revenue, it doesn't get us well beyond kind of those traditional adjustments that have happened year over year in education or general municipal expenses. What it does is, as you mentioned, it precludes us or eliminates the need to use override stabilization fund for another year.
And are you concerned that we have a few $1,000,000 extra, and only by getting that few $1,000,000 extra, we're sort of at the baseline of where we wanted to be? That's sort of how it sounded like.
I'm not necessarily concerned. I'm extremely happy that we don't have to use override stabilization, right? That's the bottom line. I'm, like everyone else, I'm also happy. We did a lot of review of local receipts, and we get the board an update on what we did over the summer on local receipts to get to that new, much higher number of 19.5 million. So, I'm happy with that. So the revenue that we have is sustainable, and I'm confident in it. Again, I'm just happy that we don't have to use the override stabilization fund at this point.
No, agreed. I
Yeah.
think it's good news, yeah.
Yeah.
Gene?
Yes.
Thank you. I just had two questions. So in continuation to what David mentioned, I think the biggest risk that sort of stands out is local receipts, especially the interest income. So we are totally, that's dependent upon stock market conditions and all that. And given that volatility and inflation and affordability, there is definitely, I think it's the right way to go, and I like these numbers and the way it's presented. But what's the plan B if things do change in the market? Because everything else seems more stable in terms of inputs coming into the town, but the interest income could be the place where we run short.
So we're confident in the interest income that we're projecting for FY '27 because our investment advisor, Bartholomew, is able to provide us a reliable estimate because we're heavily invested in bonds and they get well beyond the 12-month period on their duration to maturity. That is the most conservative area that we are moving forward into the out years as well. So this is, whenever I look at this is like a one-time readjustment of local receipts, and then it is really modest growth after that as far as the long-term projections. So we do have to keep our eye on it, but we have such a good base and such a better understanding of our time to maturity that we'll be able to prepare year over year for any reductions in return on the investments. Very predictable for us. It's not, you know, if the, you know, general equities or general stock market, you know, starts to fall for FY 27, we're still solid in the investments that we're in because we don't have a lot in equities.
One more question, Chief.
Yes, go ahead.
So we will be discussing Article 1 later tonight, and I was just wondering, are these numbers adjusted, or would they have to be adjusted if Article 1 were to pass?
The short answer is no, I don't think so. I don't. We have been tapering new growth in future years for all of our long-term projections. And everything that's in the pipeline right now, which is in front of Planning Board or ZBA, like, we have a lot of growth to still come. You know, and so short answer is no, I don't see a projection. And as we've declined new growth in future years, that's the only area that's really gonna be impacted. And that doesn't mean I think there's gonna be a big dip in revenue. I'm not, you know, I don't think that's gonna be the case, even if the moratorium does come into effect. And I know we'll talk a lot more about that later, but I'm not concerned about this revenue model, even in consideration of that.
Yes, Dennis?
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question on the local receipts. Seems to me what we're doing is, or what your department is doing, is sort of normalizing based on the fact that every year for the last 5 years or so, we've well underestimated, and then come in with a big, you know, surplus in the end, which goes to free cash. But now you're trying to sort of be a little more aggressive in your assumptions, which I think is fine because we've been very conservative, and you know, we have a history now of having much more local receipts than we estimated. So just want to concern, that's what you're going to do, and you're going to tell us about how you did that in a future meeting.
Yes, yeah, and I'll send it off to you and share all our assumptions that we used on a line-by-line basis for all of our local receipts. And we ran a couple scenarios, and, you know, we did a baseline scenario and a conservative and an aggressive. In those three scenarios, we're picking the conservative, which, you know, artificially or reduces, you know, the baseline is kind of the standard based on history and very little manipulation from us. And then conservative obviously pushes it down a little bit lower, and that is what we're going with. So, I mean, if you look at the numbers here, you know, we're using $19.5 million, despite the fact that we have FY 20, that's not, oh, so despite the fact that we raised over $20 million in actual local receipts revenue for FY 25. So we're still, the FY 27 budgeted number is still less than we earned last fiscal year. So there's still conservatism built into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple quick questions. Number one, on the emergency services, which will be the ambulance and the training, et cetera. So we appropriated the dollars last year, last budget, for the ambulance and stuff. This is another $1 million going forward. So could you just give us a little update on what that's gonna cover?
Sure. So this would be for operations itself. So the strategy that we will be presenting along with the budget is that we want to be conservative. I think conservative in our approach. I guess that's for others to judge. So we want to use cash that we have on hand to seed the first at least 3/4, if not entire year, for EMS operations. So the plan would be to put free cash in place, begin the program mid-year, sometime mid-year of fiscal 27. And we'll obviously start collecting revenue from services on day one, but we'll just be expending free cash basically until we are out of those funds. Just as a really rough number, and we still have a lot of work to do, you know, estimating somewhere around $1.5 million to run the ambulance on an annual basis. So starting mid-year, putting $1 million in place. We'll get to see, you know, some months before we, you know, start to budget the amount of revenue, you know, put anticipated revenue into the budget for fiscal year '28. So we spend the whole $1 million, and then we'll be collecting revenue, and then we should have a good cushion of program-generated revenue that we would, you know, then start to rely upon going forward. So in theory, we'll spend $1 million in free cash, we'll collect, you know, maybe $750,000 in revenue, and then we'll be, you know, kind of at day zero and start to rely upon the program revenue directly for sustaining its operations. It still is a question that I have, whether the program revenue in the initial years will cover the cost in its entirety. I'm not sure that it will do that. We need to kind of understand it, operating a basic life support ambulance, understanding the revenue. And the free cash not only puts us in a good position to kind of bank the program revenue, but it also allows us to really understand how much revenue we'll actually collect without, you know, if we just put a month or two in there, we'd be kind of, you know, really challenged if we started to not collect the revenue that we anticipate we will.
The other question I had reading through this now, our interest return on the town side has been very good. But I look back at last year, and we had to contribute a large sum of money to the retirement fund because they were very concerned that the interest return on their investments was going down. So I'm just wondering, is there any more feedback on that area?
So with regards to retirement, retirement investment is a little more volatile than how we invest the operating fund revenue for the town. So they are exposed to a little bit more equities in the stock market in general, and they're still recovering from the big dip in 2022, where we year over year still, you know, increased our investment income on the town side, just again because we're more in treasury notes, and those have been strong. So that's really what that's trying to make up, is that dip in the stock market. They also are getting a lot of pressure from the state governance board, PERAC, to lower the discount rate or the interest rate that they use in their forecasted projections. They're currently at 7.5%, and the state would like that to be lowered down to 7% or 6.75%. And obviously that's a you know, kind of a math problem on paper. If you lower the assumed rate of return, you're going to exacerbate your future liabilities. But our actual market returns over any 10-year period are over 9%, which is why we are trying to push back on PERAC and say you should let us be at 7.5%, because our actual returns are 1.5 points above that. So they are a little bit more subject to market volatility than we are, and they have that challenge of being a defined benefit pension system that has to be 100% funded, you know, by a specific date, and they've got to make up those losses, where normally when most people experience a loss in the stock market, it's a loss, and, you know, they're not trying to add more cash to get back to a particular number.
Well, I just thought it was important that, going back to last year, we did fund additional
Yeah.
money where we thought we were very close, fully funded, and then all of a sudden we've slipped because of the market. So I just
Absolutely.
think it's something that we have to keep a close eye on. So, any additional questions? No? Okay, then I guess, well, it's past the 6:15, so we can open up the public hearing. So talk about the upcoming article for the special town meeting on December the 17th.
Ready to go?
Bring
So I'll
this
come on.
forward.
So I will provide a brief overview to the committee, and then Mr. Goldrick is going to show a presentation and go through a couple slides and talk at a little bit of a more granular level than I will. But
Did you vote to open the public hearing?
I just opened it.
Okay.
No.
Do we have to?
We have to take
vote?
Oh, we have to vote on it, excuse me. I take that back.
So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So the December 17th, 2025 special town meeting does have one article on it, and it's a zoning article. And I'll talk a little bit about the purpose and the general rationale for bringing it, and then Mr. McGoldrick will talk at that more granular level. So we've all known and seen that there's been significant development interest in this community. And that development interest kind of touches all four corners of the community, but there's been kind of a disproportionate amount of interest within some of our commercial corridors and definitely within Route 20 if you compare that single corridor to much of the rest of the community. So, of course, you know, as select board and town staff engage conversations, and I know finance committee members and town meeting members engage in what's going on in the community, you know, residents really notice it and can feel those impacts. And I think the same goes for our public infrastructure and our roadway safety. It's feeling, you know, some impacts from this development. So if we go back in time about 20 years ago, the town put in overlay districts along Route 20 and Route 9. And those two overlay districts, known as the Lakeway Overlay District and the Route 20 Overlay District, had a number of features that Mr. McGoldrick will get into. But one of the biggest things that they had that's different than the underlying zoning is the ability to develop mixed-use projects. And mixed use, really simply, at least, you know, that I'll get into, is the ability to have residential and commercial within the same development. And that was put in place, you know, from talking with people that were here, you know, some of you were, or were here, and talking with, you know, former members of the select board, et cetera, that was put in place to really incentivize development. Residential development was and continues to be more lucrative and more stable in comparison to commercial development, you know, whether that's, you know, business and office or retail. So the town thought, I think appropriately so, and we've seen it come to fruition in a number of projects, where if you incentivize developers by saying you can have a mixed-use project, you can have a residential component, and bring a commercial component. We all desire commercial development. It brings jobs to the community. It builds our commercial tax base, and we all know that the commercial tax base generally receives less services and therefore less expenses than the residents that live in town 24/7. So it was very successful. You know, you see that manifested in two critical projects or major projects, which is the Lakeway Commons redevelopment of the former Spag site and the Edgemere Drive-In redevelopment, which is where Market Basket is. So both of those projects had 250 units of residential and significant commercial. So it really worked. It brought a lot of development into the community. But I think a number of things have changed since the early 2000s. Three key things that I see. First is the strength of our standalone commercial market here in Shrewsbury. In talking with developers and kind of seeing it for our own eyes, what's going on in the community, standalone commercial development is a lot stronger than it was 20 years ago. Think of the UPS development off of Centec Boulevard. Think of our ability to finally sell Centec North that the town held on to for 20 years, and now it is, you know, fully occupied with commercial development. Think of 440 Hartford Turnpike, which is a standalone $145,000 commercial development. And, you know, those are just the big standalone projects. So things have changed. Maybe that incentive doesn't need to be as strong as it was in 2000 or 2004. And then, you know, we look at the housing market itself. It continues to be strong, and a strategy was put in place to get to higher affordable subsidized housing inventory and no longer be subject to 40B. So with the projects that are in the pipeline, we project that we'll be in potentially permanent safe harbor or 10% subsidized housing. And that, gives us an opportunity to rethink what we want along these commercial corridors. And gives us an opportunity to preserve space, limited space that we have for commercial development, because we're not going to be subject to a 40B project where a developer can come in and supersede our zoning. So a lot, as I said, things have changed in the market, and 20 years have gone by, and perhaps it's time for us to just think about how we want these critical corridors to play out. And the recent development, of course, has strained our infrastructure. We have limited water and sewer capacity, and we've done a number of good things to promote the expansion of our sewer district, and capacity in the same time by sending sewer to the Upper Blackstone and away from the Westboro treatment plant, and that's really unlocked Route 20, which I think will bring even more commercial development in there without necessarily having to incentivize it with a residential component. Now, I say these things as observations and not guarantees of what may happen, or what changes we're proposing, because we're not proposing changes. We want to take the time to study the impacts of development upon these corridors, how these overlay districts and mixed use have benefited and strained our commercial infrastructure or our general infrastructure, and then make decisions without being strained by what we're seeing right now, which is a flurry of mixed-use developments and continued interest along these commercial corridors. And if we kind of don't press pause at some point, it's going to be too late. So Select Board has set forth this initiative to hit pause, to do what we do and study and make sure that we're bringing goals forth for the community that match what the community wants. And there's been a lot of growth, and we've heard from residents that, we should take the opportunity to reconsider how our zoning impacts what people are bringing us for proposals. So with that overview, turn it over to Mr. McGoldrick. He'll talk about the nuts and bolts of moratorium and zoning better than I can, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. So, as was said by Mr. Mizikar, we're proposing a pause on mixed-use development in the overlay districts to allow the town time to study the recent project outcomes with community goals and implement land use controls where appropriate. And development interest within the overlays is increasing, and the town needs to evaluate whether the existing framework still aligns with community goals. Specifically, the proposed moratorium would temporarily prohibit mixed-use development within two of the town's overlay zoning districts unless that parcel is under plan protection. One of those districts would be the Lakeway Overlay District, which extends along Route 9 from the Burns Bridge over Lake Quinsigamond to Oak Street, overlaying portions of the commercial business and limited business districts. The Lakeway Overlay promotes walkable mixed-use environment along Route 9 by allowing relief from parking and dimensional standards through special permits. The Lakeway Overlay requires additional pedestrian safety provisions, architectural and landscaping regulations, and additional layout standards related to parking and setbacks, as well as affordable housing provisions for its utilization. Next slide, please. The other district that would be affected would be the Route 20 Overlay District, which extends along Route 20 from Flint Pond and Market Basket to the Northborough town border near the old Christmas tree shops, overlying commercial business and limited industrial districts. The Route 20 overlay offers substantial benefits for large retail, office, and light industrial users through tailored development regulations, a broader range of permitted and special permit uses, and the ability to organize campus-style development. The Route 20 overlay requires building orientation towards Route 20, continuous landscape frontage, and limits on front yard parking, as well as requiring internal pedestrian accommodations and architectural requirements aimed at non-formulaic design and parkway aesthetic. Large retail developments require additional findings to ensure compliance with corridor-specific criteria. It's important to note the recently adopted MBTA zoning overlay, which overlaps the Route 20 overlay, would not be affected by this moratorium. Next slide, please. As mentioned, this moratorium would only affect mixed-use provisions within the overlays. Commercial and industrial type uses would still be allowed to utilize the provisions of the overlay. As a brief refresher, the town of Shrewsbury defines two types of mixed use within the bylaw, vertical and horizontal. Broadly speaking, vertical mixed use considers compatible uses co-located within the same structure, while horizontal mixed use considers compatible uses in separate structures on the same lot. In Shrewsbury, mixed-use development is the only permitting process to co-locate commercial and residential uses. If adopted, neither mixed-use style would be permissible during this moratorium unless the parcel, again, is under plan protection. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the moratorium will allow the community time to conduct a study evaluating recent project outcomes with community goals implementing the land use controls where appropriate. A study is necessary to evaluate traffic conditions, water and sewer capacity, infrastructure needs, and policy alignment. Traffic continues to increase along Route 9 and Route 20. Because these corridors are controlled by MassDOT, the town needs a clearer understanding of how future development may interact with a regional roadway system that we do not manage. In terms of water and sewer capacity, long-term capacity is uncertain. A study will provide accurate information on what types and levels of future development can be supported. In terms of infrastructure needs, infrastructure conditions vary across the overlays. Updated data is required to identify potential upgrade needs, timing, and constraints. And lastly, policy alignment. Recent proposals have required extensive revisions. Refining design criteria and submittal requirements can improve alignment with community goals and make permitting more efficient. Next slide, please. The study will aim to achieve four major goals: a review of the existing zoning provisions for improvements, incorporating community expectations and related planning efforts such as the master plan update, clarify terminology to ensure zoning outcomes align with infrastructure realities and community expectations, and leverage data collected at the local and regional levels to support informed decision making. Next slide, please. Although formal scope of work will be developed in coordination with a selected consultant, community engagement will be a key element of this initiative, as it is in all of our processes. We will include a regular slate of online surveys, community forums, and other stakeholder engagement to maximize the opportunity for residents to engage in the discussion. This will be in addition to and in coordination with the engagement plan for our other related initiatives, such as the master plan update. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions from the committee? Yes?
Is mixed use allowed anywhere else in the town?
In the town center district would be the only other mixed use provision.
And that will still be allowed?
Correct. And sorry, MBTA as well.
Right. So, second question is, so, because I live on Route 20, and it has grown a lot. But if I can build residential, and I can build commercial, then what's the difference between that and mixed use as far as resource allocation? So it seems like these problems still exist. If we ban it, we don't get mixed use, we still get commercial, we still get residential, we're still gonna get mixed use in MBTA or residential MBTA, we're still gonna get it in the middle of town. So why don't we just ban it throughout the town? Ban it everywhere. If this is gonna cause problems for our resources, ban it everywhere instead of banning it in two places and still having other places. I'm just can't. So my question is, why don't we just ban the whole thing? Because I don't see by banning it in a couple of spots that we would stop the issues from occurring. Does that make sense?
It does. So I think part of the impetus of looking at the two overlay districts is that they encourage the mixed-use development in terms of infrastructure. We're seeing that is where those concerns about a roadway network that we don't necessarily manage is a little bit different from those other contexts of the MBTA zone, which we want to maintain for obvious 3A compliance, and then the town center district, which is not an overlay, it's the existing district as a whole, so.
Yeah, if I may, I would also say one of the key reasons that we think it's important here is there's a lot of interest there right now. And it sits over top of base zoning that is commercial. So we think studying whether or not we need to preserve space to be purely commercial is an important thing that we want to understand. As you know, from living in town or anyone being in town, like these are the two areas that we have for prime future development of commercial space. The level of interest that we're receiving from mixed-use proposals is fast and furious right now. And conceivably, if it continued at the pace that it did for the last 2 to 3 years, you could lose, a significant portion of that dedicated underlying commercial zoning to residential development. So I don't think it's mixed use in and of itself, and that we shouldn't allow mixed use within the community, but there's no provisions that say for every 100 residential units, you need to produce 100,000 square feet of commercial. Like, there's no ratios, that exist. So we need to look at things like that and really study the impacts of the residential part of the mixed use that's sitting over top of our commercial corridors. And I would just say why it's also important, those corridors, for much of their design development, historically, didn't really contemplate residential development, along it. And sometimes you could have a commercial development that is, provides a similar number of cars to residential, but not always. And it's kind of a different challenge. I know you're familiar with the exit of Stony Hill Road in both locations. Mm-hmm. Do we want to subject more future residents to challenges and existing residents to challenges by adding more traffic and more left turns across those very busy highways as we see it today? So it's not mixed use by itself, it's where this mixed use is currently allowed.
Yes.
I had a few questions. So it seems that basically mixed use, the residential aspect of it is what is basically what's driving this. What would be the aim of the study as far as trying to get more commercial development as opposed to residential development? Because that problem will probably stay if developers make more money in residential projects as opposed to commercial projects 2 years down the road. What would be the aim of this study to basically try to prevent that from happening again?
I can start, maybe Chris can help, but we could consider expanding the types of commercial districts that we have there. It's, not every commercial use is permitted on every aspect of those corridors. So there is an opportunity to open it up to broader types of development. And, I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's clear that some of the residential component of the mixed use is a fiscal benefit in terms of the risk that a developer takes on for their financial model for the development. So in terms of attracting commercial business and commercial uses, that residential has a benefit. First and foremost, I think the study would evaluate, is that still a community need for incentivizing that commercial? And then if so, dive in deeper and say, how does that fit and what is that balance between the commercial development that is being incentivized and how much residential is related to that? So I think that's where the study would look, but again, we have to have that conversation with the community.
2 more questions.
Yes. Go ahead.
So as far as the study is concerned, I saw that we would have to hire a consultant. So would that have to go through town meeting again to appropriate the funds, or do we have a plan to immediately start this effort if it passes?
In terms of funding, we do have some funding that's available through planning board fee account that I think we may be able to utilize. We may have to go to town meeting to appropriate additional funding if those other fees are not able to cover it, but right now we do have sufficient funding. We haven't put a price on this yet, but we're developing the RFP and should have that shortly, so.
Thank you. And my final question,
Mr. Schreiber, if I might just add to that too. So one of the things, as Mr. McGoldrick said before, we plan to leverage the master plan process that is starting anyway. So you'll remember in the spring town meeting, we put $200,000 aside for that project. So much of this work, and we can concentrate some of the work for the master plan process to include this. And we also have an economic corridor study going on of Route 9 and Route 20 right now through the STC. So I don't disagree with anything Mr. McGoldrick said, but we have those other projects in the line already that will help shed some light on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mizuka. And my final question, Mr. Chair, this may be a difficult question, but you did mention that there were some parcels that had, which were already under plan protection, and I'm sure there'll be some grandfathered in projects as well. Is there any danger for litigation in terms of property owners who may have invested in a property thinking they would do a certain sort of development which they can't do and they get delayed? And where do we stand on that from a legal perspective?
By and large, communities don't have liability when they change their zoning through the processes that are afforded to us through the state. So short answer is, it's very low risk. I can't say it's zero because anyone could, file a lawsuit, but normally they wouldn't, be dismissed pretty early in the process because, we're going through a formal public process and we have the right to change zoning through town meeting, afforded under the general laws. What we do see is, some property owners over the last few weeks are affording themselves to protections that they have. So the law also gives them protections to, to file certain types of plans to preserve the use rights or all rights for the property zoning on the date of filing. So that would be up to the date of town meeting until we vote. So there's plenty of provisions, I think, for, property owners to protect themselves. Some have exercised those rights already. So I think our risk is very low, for any challenges or suits.
Thank you. No more questions.
I'll go Jim first.
Okay, thank you. Couple different questions, if I could. Is it fair to say that 40B is the primary driver of us allowing to consider this?
I think the results would be ineffective, as, essentially if 40B was, still a concern, right? Because 40B a moratorium wouldn't protect you from 40B.
Okay.
So if we were still subject to 40B, a sole residential development could still come along.
Thank you. And then just my follow-up regarding why the study is needed, and Kevin, you just kind of touched on this a little bit. Over the years, these projects come in, there's always a traffic study, there's always a water sewer capacity. How far away do you think, assuming this were to pass, and I'm in favor of it, but I'm just curious, I feel like a lot of this legwork has to be already established. Granted, it needs to be revisited, but you know how much water, sewer, and things of that nature that particular parcel or that district can sustain. I was just wondering if you could comment maybe a little bit more on that as you look for it. I'm sure you want to take a deeper dive, because in my mind, I look at the Route 9, right? There's not a lot of space. I mean, the biggest thing you might face is someone maybe want to tear down something and restart over. I'm assuming you have a good chunk of that. It just really, without putting words in anyone's mouth, is like, what direction do you want to take it is really kind of the driver. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's very fair. So I think as mentioned, we will have the master plan update. We're just finishing up the townwide economic plan that has extensive data in terms of those commercial corridors. And in addition, what doesn't always get wrapped into these projects is the project specific traffic reports and things for each of those parcel levels. So really what I envision from a data collection process is collecting all of that data, putting it together, and then bringing that in a packaged form to the community to frame a discussion around policy and mixed-use provisions in the community with that data to frame that discussion and have a better outcomes related to community objectives. So.
Yeah, and just to follow up, so, you know, Mr. Flynn, you're right, we certainly know bulk numbers, right? We're allowed to pump 6 million gallons a day, and we pump 5, right? Like, we know that, but to what Mr. McGoldrick was saying is, we need to take the time to apply that. Well, if we continue with this much residential development, how much can we get? What are those impacts? If we move more on a, you know, back to the base zoning and more commercial, what does that look like, and how long do we have that capacity, and what changes do we need? There's probably 0 scenarios where at some point we aren't gonna need more capacity, but we should really understand the difference in the pacing of those two types of developments within these corridors, if nothing else.
Last one?
Yeah.
And then just on, and again, you may have already touched on this on slide 10, just the review zoning provisions. Can you just elaborate what that means? Is that like permits and what can and cannot go there? And if you could share an example of what couldn't go there today if you wanted to.
Yes, I mean, the zoning provisions, I think that, we're gonna look at that broadly, primarily the overlay districts, but, again, I don't wanna really put bumpers on it yet.
I understand.
Until we've, kinda gotten into it, but, looking at the zoning overall and what are the ways that we can incentivize commercial development, either, existing provisions that we need to put in the overlay districts, or, if there's other, zoning provisions that we can consider, examples from other communities, or kind of new best practices that we're seeing in the field that we can consider with the community. I think taking all of those zoning provisions and just essentially, doing a bylaw review in relation to mixed use would be one of those
Okay,
in commercial development.
all right, thanks, Chris.
Yep, thank you. With the zoning that when we reevaluate the zoning down there, is there possibility of we can't build on those zoning, or because it's private property, is that out of the question? To sort of zone it so that you really couldn't put anything there, anything large.
I think there's ways that we could look at being more restrictive in zoning in terms of, massing. You could look at, height restrictions and, other kind of setbacks. So currently, the Route 20 overlay district and the Lakeway overlay district, they allow for additional height as one of the incentives for commercial and mixed use. So whereas you're typically limited to a few stories for commercial, the intent is, under the existing zoning was to provide additional residential height so that you can co-locate those uses. Again, I think reviewing, is that meeting community objectives as it is today, or is there better ways to formulate that? Those height restrictions don't currently differentiate between the horizontal mixed use and the vertical mixed use, so it may make sense to put, additional floors of residential on a vertical mixed use project, but a horizontal, are you providing too much benefit for the resultant commercial?
Kind of follow up on that?
Yes.
So within the master plan and everything else, we can take a lot of community input on what, everyone I talk to doesn't want any building. I don't think we can go that route, but it would be good to, put limiting there. I mean, make over 55 communities if you're gonna do residential. If you're gonna do commercial, maybe bigger setbacks, larger parking lots. Do we also have the ability to, in the zoning, force the developers to fund things, or is that something we can't do?
Yeah, not in Massachusetts, it's not permissible.
Okay. Because that's the other thing, I think, some of that infrastructure can be paid for.
I say that broadly. I mean, there are provisions that recognize, like through MIPA, and that's why we do traffic studies and stuff like that, but it can't, it's not founded in the zoning itself.
And just touching on the community engagement, I just want to say, I think that's going to be the key feature of a lot of this process. As was stated, I think a lot of the data collection is probably done, other than kind of packaging it, and doing a little bit of extra digging on that. So the community engagement is going to be, by and large, the bulk of this. And to that point of, you know, the sentiments of no additional building, in the community engagement that we've done in other related planning activities, I think we have really enlightening conversations with the residents when we go beyond that of, okay, when we say no additional development, but what is the actual concern? And when we start to have those deeper conversations, it becomes really enlightening in terms of some of these impacts that we've talked about, the water and sewer capacity and the traffic that is generated from these projects. And I think that's the conversation that we have to continue to have with residents.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as community engagement goes, what is the plan to actually have the community engage? I look around the room, there's 3 people for an open meeting. Every town meeting member, I believe, should have received an invite to this open meeting where they could ask the questions and, you know, if we want, grill you on it or give you our recommendations or thoughts. So how are we gonna get the community involved? Because I personally don't think this town's community likes to get involved unless it's on Facebook and to, you know, complain.
I think it's a fair sentiment, but what I'll say is I think that our office has been doing a lot more outreach for a lot of our initiatives, and I think we're really fine-tuning some of the public engagement and getting people out. Notably, you know, our community forum for the townwide economic plan, although there was only, you know, 10 to 13 people at each of those meetings, the surveys were really outreach and getting, you know, 60, 70, 80 survey responses. I think as we fine tune that, and for projects like this, I think we'll be able to reach more of the community. That said, I've outlined our kind of regular slate of engagement opportunities, but we're gonna be looking with the consultant and with the community to understand what are those other ways that we can meet the residents where they are and really, you know, drive more discussion with them, so.
Yeah, I mean, have you thought about posting a lot more stuff in the Shrewsbury community forums? Just meeting invites and all that, because there's a lot of people there that are very vocal.
That's a private group, so it's not a space that we'll engage in.
Just a quick follow-up. We're recommending a 2-year wait, 2-year. Is that a hard date, assuming it passes? Not to split hairs, but let's just say we make great progress.
It
Can we
is.
bring it in? It is a hard date.
It's a hard day.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Mr. McGoldrick touched on it, but a moratorium process is a formal process. You know, it will be reviewed by the Attorney General, the actions that we take, the rationale for the moratorium, and, you know, it has to be a defined period of time, so it will be set in stone once we pass it, if it's passed.
Does that need to be approved, Kevin?
It, just like every other zoning bylaw
Yeah.
does, yes. Once it leaves town meeting, it goes to the Attorney General's office
All
for
right.
review.
Could they say no?
They could.
Yep.
They could.
Thanks.
Elaine, and then I'll go.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the presentation, by the way. So I know these overlay districts were put in for purpose, right? So do we have like cumulative growth numbers since the inception of these overlays to date? You know, like what did we achieve as a town by putting these overlays? Do we have those numbers?
Well, I mean, the projects that you, Mr. McGoldrick will correct me if I'm wrong, but the projects that you have drawn down upon the overlay districts, to my knowledge, are just Lakeway and Edgemere. Those are the only 2 permits that have been issued, correct me if I'm wrong, have been issued pulling down on the overlay districts. So those 2 projects. So
Polar views.
what's that? Oh,
Polar
Polar
Views, yeah.
Views on Harrington Avenue as well, across from Quinn 35, which is a mixed-use development. So that's 13 units, something like that, and then 250 units, so like a little over 500 residential units and just shy of 300,000 square feet of commercial. So, but it's just those projects.
Okay. So the reason just a couple of follow-ups. So the reason I am asking is because I know some of these, like one of them was in effect for 2 decades, right? But like when we talk about Edgemere or Lakeway, these 2 projects came came up in last 7 or 8 years, right? So there was a dormant period of at least 7 or 8 years. So I'm sure there were some market conditions. So I think my suggestion would be, I think as part of this study, we also need to see the effect of what we are seeing as a growth was not only just the zoning, but what other market parameters fed into that. So whenever we are trying to kind of amend whatever the suggestions would be, we need to think about it as what are the other external market conditions that may or may not facilitate, because these two projects, they just came up in last 8 years, right? That's why I was asking, what's the cumulative growth, either percentage or dollar amount that we achieved in 20 years or 10 years in respective those corridors.
Sure.
I think that will be good to showcase that. And one more would be is like if this goes into effect, what's the total percentage of area which is still available for commercial development, to David's point, right? I mean, there is some area that will still be in effect for us to attract the additional revenue, because there is this thought process that we have been hearing for last 5 years is like, how do we lessen the burden on residential tax by bringing in commercial, right? So.
Yeah, so the commercial would not be affected. So you'd be, the existing commercial provisions in both underlying and overlay districts, as long as it's a commercial-only development, would still be able to move forward through permitting under both overlay or underlying zoning. So as long as it doesn't include housing, it would be permissible.
Thanks.
Any additional question? Yes?
So I know the planning board supported this, but is there any process, if this goes through special permit or other process, that people could still build mixed use with the moratorium on?
So as long as the moratorium is on, essentially what the moratorium does is it says that the mixed-use provisions are not allowable in, during that period. So there would be no ability for the board to grant a special permit for mixed use.
Unless there's plan protection in place.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, what's that mean?
So,
So there are certain provisions where a property can be granted plan protection, also called grandfathering. So, for example, if a project files a approval not required plan, they are granted a 2-year protection.
So like the development that's planned across Elmwood on Route 20, that's mixed use, correct?
across from where? Sorry.
From the Elmwood.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That's
Yes.
mixed use, and that's gonna go in no matter what we do.
Oh, they have filed for plan protection.
Right, so they've got it already.
And so it's still so they would be still under the discretionary permit. So it's not like a 40B where the community is beholden to approve it. It is by special permit.
Yeah. But they do have that, they would be allowed to build residential,
Mixed use.
mixed use, under what is in place when they filed for their plan protection, which is the current mixed use provisions. And, there's a couple other properties that have filed as well, including, what we all know is the Sam Adams property at the Y at Main, or at Maple and Route 9, that they had filed in September, so they have protections as well.
I think that's an important thing during the presentation to mention that, because you've got Centec is exempt from that too, and that mixed development that Sam Adams has. So people fully understand that, because they've been back and forth and for a number of years during the permitting process.
Is there any other off the top of your head?
Follow up to that?
Yeah.
308,
308, 312.
308, 312, Boston Turnpike also filed A&R.
So I had a related question. Those ones that are under plan protection, are they like a potentially large-scale project with 250 potential residential units? So we're talking about up to 1,000 extra units, even with the moratorium?
That'd be about
500. About 500.
Are there 4 planned or just 2 of them?
So there's the 525 Hartford Turnpike, and the old Chelmsford 335 Maple. So those are both capped at 200, they're maximizing capped at 250 units. So that would be the 500, and then you have 308, 312, which is currently before planning board, and they've reduced it to 36 units currently.
30, I'm sorry, 36?
335 is capped at 270, because it's Lakewood District,
Thank you.
so they're at 270.
So around 600 potentially extra units. Thank you.
I just have a question about what happens at the end of this 2-year period. Do we then, either based on our research, decide we no longer want to have the overlay and we then vote to remove that and it goes back to purely commercial permanently?
So at the end of the moratorium, those provisions automatically lapse. So within that 2-year period, we would either have to adopt new zoning provisions that would, be in effect for that period when the moratorium lapses. If we don't have anything in place, it would just simply lapse and the existing zoning is back to be effective.
Thank you.
Yes. Diane?
So just, I want to, the language is a little bit confusing to me, right? So I just want to clarify, the sub-bullets that we're pointing to, those are the specific mixed-use things that we're putting a moratorium on, correct?
Correct. So this, essentially, in the Route 20 overlay, what this would do in effect, very specifically, is in the Route 20 overlay and the Lakeway overlay zoning bylaws, it adds a paragraph at the very beginning that specifically states that the mixed use, and it points to that section in that expanded use provision in the bylaw. It says that is no longer in effect for a period of 24 months.
Okay. And then, so all the other pieces of the overlay district, so, just because it was recent, like the brew pub doesn't need a special permit, like those things wouldn't be impacted.
Right.
Okay. If I can ask another question, so are there other things that are disincentivizing commercial development within these overlays, within the town? Are there other things that we're gonna do as part of this 2-year to make improvements in zoning or anything like that, or we don't know yet?
So I think the townwide economic plan, they're developing actionable items for us to consider. So I think that will lay some of that groundwork, specifically towards incentivizing commercial development. But in terms of anything beyond that, that's part of what the study will look at, is if there's policy adjustments to be made.
So that's more under the economic development project that's going on, not specific to this then?
I think both, but yeah, mostly that will lay a lot of the groundwork.
One last one, sorry. Just back on timeline, I was just looking at your last slide. So if this were to pass next week, the target is to go live 1/1/2026. Thank you.
For that week, yeah. Still writing the RFP, so.
Do you know what the normal turnaround is with the Attorney General, time-wise?
They have 90 days.
Yeah, 90 days, and I pinned that about March, April.
So our zoning will go into effect
Immediately?
upon passage,
Yeah.
subject to the review of the Attorney General. Correct.
Yes, Dave.
One last question. Do we have any idea about what the bid will be if it goes through, what a project like this would cost?
I mean, ballpark, I think, given, again, that a lot of that, the master plan update and a lot of the townwide economic plan will have a lot of the lack of a better term, a lot of the grunt work done for us. I think anywhere between 10 to 20,000 would be more than enough for something of this.
Thank you.
Is that already in the budgeting?
Yeah.
It is.
And we would plan to use planning board fees for that.
Does the planning board know that?
Okay.
They do now.
They do now.
Actually, they might not, so.
Well, if there's no other questions, we thank you for the presentation. and We'll move on to our next.
Are there any public?
Are there any public comments?
Yeah, I don't see anybody out there in the public other than one, Donna. I'm good. Okay. Well, then we're gonna
Close the public hearing.
close the public hearing and
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second. Second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Close the public hearing, and we're gonna discuss it and
Mhm.
make the recommendation. Is there any more discussion from the committee?
I'll say this, like, I know what the purpose is. I do think it's diluted a little bit, because like you pointed out, Syntec Boulevard's right there, you can do it there, there's a lot of places you can still do it in the town. So I wished if it was gonna be a problem, you could more broadly done it. So if mixed use is a problem, then probably ban it down in Syntec, ban it on these other places, during that time period. So I'd like to have seen that. But I also understand the planning board, looked at it, they supported it, they are the experts in it. Was there any thoughts of if this goes through expanding it out, if that makes sense?
So it doesn't, it can't, mixed-use development isn't possible anywhere else in town except for the town center right now.
In the MBTA,
MBTA, but the entire area of MBTA is just under construction or in permitting right now. So the full area, or the effective full area, all the developable land is pretty much spoken for and under development. 409 South Street is before the ZBA, and 33 Green Street is, they've started construction and executing that plan.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, if anything else, it just pauses some of the building for 2 years while we figure out the next steps for the town. I don't think we can ban everything and close everything down. So, I think it's a good start.
Any other additional questions? Remarks?
We need a motion to
Then we
recommend
need
it.
a motion to go forward at the special town meeting for our recommendation.
I'll make a motion, Gene, to recommend the Article 1 regarding mixed-use moratorium at next week's special town meeting.
Second.
Any further discussions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is to review upcoming meetings. First one being December the 17th, special town meeting. Is there any questions or problems? No?
We'll probably just schedule this for 6:45, just in case there's any business.
You what?
We'll schedule this for 6:45.
Okay.
Just in case.
Just in case.
And then we'll go to the next meeting of the Finance Committee, then will be January the 15th, 2026, February 26th, 2026, and then we'll get into the budget hearing starting on March the 17th, 19th, and 21st.
Mr. Chairman, if we could just expand upon that proposal a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just start with the February 26th, just to note that is not the normal third Thursday, because that is school vacation week. So
Okay.
it's the fourth week of March.
Thank you.
And then we are proposing an extra night of budget hearings, so we're proposing the Tuesday. And we still have some details and schedules to flesh out, but we would propose having the school go one night, just school.
That will be good,
Yes.
actually.
So conceptually, what we were thinking is, you know, maybe, so that's a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, that's a week of excitement.
A week before vacation.
So, you know, maybe, you know, we'll come in, we'll provide an overview of the budget and, you know, high-level overview, because we'll have done it on the 26th, and then we'll get through maybe a lighter functional area like administration and finance on that Tuesday night. And then perhaps the school committee could come in and present to you on the Thursday night, and then we'd have a much lighter load on Saturday to give a little bit more room for questions and not be so rushed. So conceptually, we're happy to take feedback. We have 3 months to get there, but, you know, that was our thoughts.
Chair?
Yes,
You have a question? There was discussion last year about, and we did have a tri-board meeting at one point of having the finance committee a little more in tune with some of the budgeting numbers before we see them, you know, all at once. Is that still something we could do in the February timeframe?
We can certainly ask, yeah.
Yeah, I just think it would be good, because we're gonna be asked to give a recommendation, and it'd be good to get a better understanding beforehand how everything went.
well, just one follow-up on that too. We also talked about some of our members sitting in on some of the department reviews for their budgets. So I'm hoping that could be worked into that time period also, so.
Okay.
Not only the three board, but also being able to, allowing some of our members to sit in on the bigger budget numbers. I think that's what we talked about on there. I don't think we have to sit in on every small budget amounts, but the larger ones, I think it would be of interest to the committee members so that we can move through some of those larger numbers more quickly, rather than get into the nitty-gritty at the open meetings that we have to have. So,
Yeah, it definitely,
Yeah.
it will definitely help, you know, understand the needs and wants, you know, and what's going through, you know. I think
Yeah.
that'd be good.
Yeah, I think last year we were talking about some things we didn't get in the budget that we wanted, you know. I think there was a fire inspector we had wanted, you know, that the town had wanted. And I think that information before then is important to us because, you know, as we've hired since the override about 100 people in the town, having that, well, we're gonna hire these people, we can't have those people. Well, I say the schools as well. You know, they have over
I think
90.
that's pretty big.
Well, they did 90 people. So, so if we go.
I honestly don't think so.
Okay, I thought that was the number they gave, but that way, I think, before the budget comes up, you know, we have the departments come, they go, well, we couldn't get this position, it'd be nice to have that ahead of time, so we can look at what we think, maybe, whatever that's worth, we recommend.
Understood.
Gene?
Yes.
Kevin, I like the idea of having the school come in, but last you had asked of us any other ideas. Are you still open to that as we think through? I know we got some time, but if we had an idea or two, we could share that with you.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Just to streamline it, I mean,
Yeah.
having gone through it to everyone's point, like,
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure we're getting best use out of that, who's coming in. You
Sure.
know, I don't wanna just, I'm not suggesting we go through the motions, but just having a little bit more substance, that's all. And that's for us to say to you.
Sure.
I'm not asking for you to bring that back.
Yeah,
But if you're open to that, especially look at that Saturday. But like I said, I like the Tuesday or whatever day you choose for the
Mhm.
school. Maybe just more of a narrow scope, but some of the larger budgets. You know,
Yeah.
Not dismissing the smaller ones, but.
no, I
I'll
completely
talk to the
understand.
chair and
Yeah.
we can circle back on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to talk.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think that's why the three board is still very important, to just get kind of a general feeling of moving forward with the whole budget process on there, I think. And I think that three board could be really structured maybe a little bit differently, like round table type approach rather than a formal type approach. I think the last couple that I've attended, they've been more of a formal type thing. Maybe it can be just more of a general roundtable discussion. That's, again, that's just my feeling. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And then if we, sorry, excuse me, so if we did do that, right, the focus of that tri-board meeting would just be on the one fiscal year, or we're also looking kind of long-term first and then looking at the fiscal year? What would be the point?
I would think that would be a great approach if we could do from both the present and going forward on there. I think that was.
I think in
because,
conjunction with master planning, you know, if we are looking out
What's
5 years ahead.
Going ahead, because if you think back, when the select board decided on the procedure going forward with the override, there was, you know, a lot of discussion, because they were talking out 3, 4, 5 years at the time. So I think, you know, that would be very important.
And I do agree something maybe a bit more informal might
Yeah,
make some sense.
I just think the more less informal would help the whole situation, that we could discuss it in a lot more detail.
I would suggest, even with the informal type, a little bit of an agenda of where we want to bring start the round table and bring it to.
Yeah.
If I may
We can
just
all
add
talk.
to Diana's point, not to go outside the rails here, I mean, if it's, we've done one, we did one last year, I think, tri-board meeting. Maybe instead of squeezing, trying to get this current year in the future, if we focus on 1 year at a time and then maybe do another one in the spring. I feel like that's a lot to ask,
Yeah.
Yeah,
in in one sitting. A lot of data and a lot
Yeah.
of preparation, just a thought.
yeah. No, I
But-
think that's a good,
We could break it out a little bit,
it's a good suggestion.
you know, even just make it twice a year, just get it on the calendar.
Yeah.
I like that suggestion.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Kevin? Do you think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, as far as content in a meeting, yeah,
Yeah,
we're
I
happy to
mean-
structure it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else to come before the committee? If not, I think,
The correspondence in the back, Gene.
Correspondence.
I didn't have it on my original one. Okay, on the correspondence. Is there any discussion on the correspondence? Basically, Dr. Sawyer, Finance Committee, emails.
Oh, I think the emails were on the vote, the last
Yep.
town meeting.
Yep.
So, I mean, I will say it was nice to see people actually contacting the finance committee about their positions,
Yeah,
and they were fairly, you know, I thought they were well written.
any further discussion?
Nope.
If not, I'll have a motion to adjourn. And we thank, we
moved.
thank everybody for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Wednesdays.